Somewhere in the south of Portugal, there is an apartment that has not changed owners in almost 20 years, because no one wants to live inside a mystery. A 3-year-old girl went to sleep in that room on a warm May night. She never woke up in it again. No struggle was heard. No scream was recorded. No one saw a door open, or a window break, or a shadow cross the terrace. And yet, sometime between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, Madeleine McCann simply vanished. What happened in that room, in those 30 minutes, has consumed 3 police forces, 2 decades, and millions of hours of public obsession. And still, nobody can say with certainty what happened to her. To understand how one missing child became one of the most examined cases in modern criminal history, you have to understand where it began, not with a crime, but with a holiday. In the spring of 2007, Praia da Luz was the kind of place British families went to disappear from their ordinary lives for a week. Whitewashed villas, a quiet strip of Atlantic coastline, a resort called the Ocean Club, where doctors and lawyers and their children came to relax under a sun that made everything feel, for a little while, safe. Jerry McCann was a cardiologist. Kate McCann was a doctor too. They had come with a group of close friends, 7 adults who would later become known in headlines around the world simply as the Tapas 7. Their children slept in nearby apartments while the parents took turns walking back every half hour or so, checking in, then returning to dinner. It was a routine. It felt ordinary. It felt, to them, safe enough. Madeleine was 9 days from her 4th birthday. She had spent the day at the resort's kids' club, playing tennis with her father that afternoon. She was, by every account, a bright, curious, strong-willed little girl, the kind of child who noticed things. That evening, she was put to bed alongside her 2-year-old twin siblings, Sean and Amelie. In the ground floor apartment the family was renting, the door was left unlocked, the window unlatched. It was a small, forgivable act of trust, the kind parents make every single night, all over the world, without a second thought. At around 10 o'clock, Kate McCann walked back to check on her children. She pushed open the door to the bedroom, and the room that should have held 3 sleeping children held 2. What followed was chaos. Resort staff and holiday makers spilled out into the dark, searching gardens, alleyways, and the beach itself well past midnight. Portuguese police arrived to a scene that had already been walked through by dozens of well-meaning strangers. Footprints layered over footprints, doors opened and closed, a bedroom no longer preserved as anything close to untouched. Within weeks, investigators would openly admit that vital forensic evidence may have been lost in those first chaotic hours, because no one had known yet that they were standing inside a crime scene. The investigation that followed became, almost instantly, a global spectacle. Newspapers printed the same haunting photograph on front pages in a dozen languages. Reward money poured in, from J.K. Rowling, from footballers, from strangers who had never set foot in Portugal. Even the Pope offered his prayers. And in the middle of that noise, Portuguese detectives were trying to do something much quieter and much harder. Figure out who, if anyone, had walked into that apartment and out again with a sleeping child in their arms. Their first real suspect wasn't a stranger passing through. It was a British expatriate named Robert Murat, living just 150 yards away, who had been helping translate for police and press in the first frantic days. He was named an official suspect within 2 weeks. He would spend the next year under suspicion, before being cleared entirely, and later paid substantial damages by British newspapers that had all but convicted him in print. Then came a twist that turned the entire case inward. Sniffer dogs, specially trained to detect the faintest trace of blood and human remains, were flown in from Britain. They reacted in the apartment and later in a car the McCanns had rented weeks after Madeleine disappeared. Portuguese police floated the idea of a 100% DNA match. For a family already living inside a nightmare, the accusation was almost unthinkable. That September, both Kate and Jerry McCann were formally named suspects in their own daughter's disappearance. It would not last. Within days, Portuguese authorities began quietly walking back the DNA claims. Prosecutors eventually ruled there was no evidence to justify pursuing the McCanns further. But the damage to how the public saw them had already been done, and it would take years and several successful libel cases before the narrative began to shift again, this time toward the man who had once led the investigation itself. Detective Gonçalo Amaral, removed from the case after criticizing British police, later wrote a book claiming Madeleine had died accidentally in that apartment, and that her parents had staged the abduction to cover it up. It was a theory with no forensic backing, one the official investigation never supported, and yet it spread and lingered for over a decade, forcing the McCanns to fight in court simply to reclaim their own story. By July 2008, with no charges, no body, and no resolution, Portuguese police shelved the case entirely. For a while, it seemed the trail had simply gone cold. One more missing child the world would slowly, guiltily stop searching for. Then, in the summer of 2020, everything changed. German prosecutors announced they were investigating a convicted sex offender named Christian Brueckner, a man who had drifted in and out of the Algarve for over a decade, living out of a battered camper van, breaking into holiday apartments, and, as police would later reveal, already serving time for the rape of an elderly woman in the very same town where Madeleine vanished. Investigators said they had what they called concrete evidence that Brueckner was responsible for her death. Not forensic proof, not a body. Concrete evidence. A phrase that would haunt the case for years because no one outside the investigation has ever been told exactly what it means. An old acquaintance later claimed that Brueckner, drinking one night, referring to Madeleine, had simply said, "She didn't scream." A second-hand account. Unproven, impossible to verify, and yet it became one of the most repeated sentences in the entire case. In the years since, investigators have dug beneath a reservoir 30 miles from the resort. They have torn through derelict houses and dry wells near a village called Atalaya, using ground radar built to see through soil itself. Each time, hope flickers. Each time, the results come back the same, nothing conclusively tied to Madeleine. Brueckner, meanwhile, has never been charged in her disappearance, not once, in over 5 years of being publicly named as the man responsible. He completed a separate prison sentence and walked free in September 2025, fitted with an ankle monitor, still legally presumed innocent of the one crime the world associates him with. Which leaves us, nearly 20 years later, exactly where investigators began, with a locked question inside an unlocked room. Kate and Jerry McCann still send New Year's messages thanking the world for not giving up. Somewhere in Germany, a man walks free, watched but unaccused. Somewhere in England, a police unit that has now outlived some of its own detectives keeps a case file open, still hoping a single new fact will finally close it. And somewhere, in the space between what we know and what we can prove, a little girl who would be in her 20s now is still, officially, simply, missing. Because in the end, the hardest part of this story isn't the mystery of what happened that night. It's the quiet, unbearable possibility that somebody, somewhere, has known the truth all along and has simply chosen never to tell it.